Oh, we're live now.
Yes, we
Okay.
are. Hey,
Hey,
we unmuted
everybody.
We are unmuted too.
Oh, yeah.
You
Hey,
are.
We are good to go.
we're so glad you guys could join us today
We're here.
on Trail Talk.
Yes.
Yeah, we're live at the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center
On a
in
Wednesday
Duncan.
here.
Mhm. Yeah, where we
Wednesday
always
at
are.
3 o'clock.
You can always find us here. I'm Edie and
You're echoing.
I'm echoing.
You're echoing Edie and I'm mimicking Mary.
That was a good one.
I like it.
Yeah. Anyway, we're really glad you guys are here. We're taking a step back in time. We're going to hit up the old territorial governors.
Yeah.
There were, I can't remember, 9 or 10 territorial governors, and
prior?
prior to statehood. So we're going to talk about the first 5. And so when we talk about the territorial governors, the first one, we'll just go ahead and jump over there.
George Steele.
So George Steele, 1890, May of 1890. So the first land run was in April of 1889. And after that first land run is when they split what would become Oklahoma, and it was Indian Territory to the east,
Correct.
Oklahoma Territory more to the west.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't like a straight up and down dividing line.
But
But-
more straight than it was curved.
Yeah.
Diagonal.
Yeah, and so these men served in Oklahoma Territory, but the years following 1889, came the other land runs and land giveaways.
Right.
And so these men played a pretty big role in all that. But
Especially him.
yeah, George Steele, the very first man to have any kind of gubernatorial, isn't that the word?
That sounds like a Willy Wonka candy.
Yeah, gubernatorial rule, I guess. I mean, it was the first attempt at establishing a
Right.
government.
Right. And he had to establish every
Right.
aspect of it more or less.
Yeah, so he was born in 1839 in Indiana,
Mhm.
grew up in Marion, Indiana. And Indiana's fond of people names for their cities. Gary, Indiana, Marion, Indiana. I'm sorry,
They stuck with the theme.
I digress. Yeah. So that just hit me. Anyway, this is interesting the way they said this. He read law.
And that wasn't,
That's
he wasn't the only
repeated.
one, right? He
And
read law,
I
not
don't-
practiced,
Mhm.
not became or passed the board.
Yeah, studied. Maybe there wasn't a law school, and that is how you
Possibly.
became a lawyer. You
He could read
read
it.
the
He
law,
could read it.
and after you read it, I don't know,
I'm gonna read this law
Could
12
be.
times and I'm gonna be a lawyer.
I know that
I'm glad
that's what it sounds like. they
That's exactly
did.
what it sounds like. Like
Yeah.
they made it through a book or something.
Yeah, so if any of you viewers know the answer to that, I would love to hear what you have to say about it. But all of these men also were involved in the Civil War.
Right.
They
went on
all
to different
volunteered
plans.
to fight in the Civil War.
In fact,
And
Steele was an officer in the
Yeah.
infantry.
yeah, and of course, from Indiana, he fought for the Union.
Mhm.
And then he was married 1866, the year after the Civil War ended. He
ran
was,
unsuccessful businesses.
yeah. He was a Republican, and President Benjamin Harrison appointed him to the governor to become the governor of in Oklahoma Territory. Yeah, so he had to establish
Command.
executive,
Legislative.
legislative, and judicial branches of government. I mean,
For the
that's like,
territorial,
yeah, but I mean, that's just like the
And then,
basic.
yeah, the policies, the institutions, filling the positions of those positions.
Didn't he like,
The-
he set out
the
county
boundaries.
boundaries.
The county seats,
I mean, this guy was starting from scratch.
like, here's your map, here, we're gonna appoint you now. How'd you like the glory? Now here's what
Right.
you got to do. Here's your
Exactly.
to-do list.
Yeah, I mean, so much responsibility, but he took it very
He
seriously.
did.
He even,
The establishment of those colleges.
yes, established University of Oklahoma, there's only one. Oklahoma A&M, which is now Oklahoma State University. Emory's giving the
Yeah,
shout
yeah.
out, the pistols firing over there.
He's off.
And the Territorial Normal School, which became University of Central Oklahoma. It went through several name changes. Central State University was
Mhm.
another.
So I have what reading law was.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So reading law was the method used in common law countries, particularly the United States, for people to enter the legal profession before the advent of law schools.
Okay, there you go. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Emory. So our research person, Emory,
Our OSU fan.
did a deep dive for us and found out before the establishment of law schools, that is exactly what people did. They read the law. And I guess if you make it through a law book and you still want
You
to,
interpret it the way others.
yeah, then you can practice. You can
Right.
become a lawyer. So anyway, I think they said they become a member of the bar. So I don't know if that required a
It's
test.
kind of
or-
test or like maybe you had to sit in front of a committee and
Right,
answer questions.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, very interesting. So, yeah, he also established the state library during his term. So, I mean, I think I think that's really important that he saw the need for higher education,
Mhm.
and a place where people could go and find books,
For that education.
for that
yes,
education,
Supporting that.
Yes, exactly. He really wanted to like push public education, but that did not really happen
He didn't have a
under
lot of
his
success
term.
in that area.
And I mean, you have to think, why wouldn't that be a popular thing? Well, the territory is being settled by people who are, mostly the cities that were formed after the first land run, were scattered.
Right.
And most of the population of Oklahoma Territory at the time would have been farmers,
Right.
people working out,
Right.
and putting in schools. I can see where the struggle
Mhm.
would have been
Right.
for that. Another thing that he dealt with was where to put the capital, the territorial capital. And the settlement of the public domain lands. And so there were factions. I mean, we all know the history.
Right.
Guthrie started out as the capital,
Mhm.
and that was moved, but this is even prior to statehood.
Right. I mean,
This was a thing
places
going
else, I
on.
didn't even realize Kingfisher was in the running there for a while.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? One major issue involves settling tribal claims to land in Oklahoma Territory and making the land available for occupation by non-Indians. Okay, so we know that all of the area was Indian territory. All of the land literally had been given to multiple tribes.
Correct.
And so when they start giving the land away, they start making allotments. They convince the tribes, look, you can, instead of all of this land belonging to all of you,
Mhm.
you can have allotments, and then you'll have your very own land.
Right.
Each person
Right.
will have their
Instead of
very
tribal,
own land,
England.
which was literally the beginning of the end for them, their possession
Right.
of the land.
Right.
And then how to allow non-Indian people to be landowners and all that. But he made
Federal
treaties with the
treaties.
Sac and Fox, Shawnee and Potawatomi tribes, which led to the second land run.
With 868,414 acres available.
Right. On
That's a lot
some
of land.
yeah, and so, and those the two counties that emerged from that land run were Lincoln and Potawatomi. If you're kind of a geography person, kind of want to know where that, is. And then he resigned in October of 1891. So like a year and just a few months, and he was like, I'm done.
Yeah, I think I'm exhausted. I need a
Yeah,
vacation.
You got your money's worth out of me. So, he-
resigned
yeah,
in
he-
Indiana.
went back to Indiana and served in Congress. But he laid a really good foundation for, yeah, yeah. And so next is Robert Martin, and I realize this is not a great picture, but
Even I have to back up here.
most of the
But it's coming through
information
really clear.
I get from Oklahoma, the
Historical
the
Society.
Oklahoma Historical Society website, and they did not have a picture of him.
At all.
And I had to go digging to find one,
Now, this looks like maybe it's one of those little,
a monocle.
yes.
He's wearing a monocle,
So this is not a photo, like a
Yeah.
scratch. It's-
yeah, which, I think a monocle works like when people have contacts and one is for up close and one is
I
for
just keep-
distance.
I keep hearing
I,
one or two. Which one's better?
Yeah.
One or two?
I bet that that's what a monocle did.
That would be so hard to like stare.
Yeah, I've never really wanted to try that, but I bet
Mhm.
that's what happened. Okay, so he steps in November 1891 and takes over. He was, he grew up in Ohio, attended college, also read law. He taught high school while he was reading law and entered a law practice, joined the Ohio Volunteer Infantry as an officer in the Civil War, but became ill.
Right.
And-
And so he was discharged in 1863.
Yeah, so he missed out on serving for the entire time. But then he was big into Republican politics. I should point out too that, historically, the governors in Oklahoma have been primarily Democrat. I think
talked
I
about
think
that.
Henry Bellman,
Right.
Mary Fallon, and Kevin Stitt. I couldn't think of his name. I think that they are the three Republican governors who have served. There might have been one other.
And those are recent.
Yeah. And we've just been a Democrat, a democratically leaning state based on the politics of the party and how all that shifted. During the days of the territorial government, almost everyone was Republican. Yeah, it was flip-flop, but now you have to remember, post-Civil War, Republicans and Democrats were different.
They almost kind of flip flop.
Yeah,
Than
they,
what they are now.
yeah,
Right.
they flip-flopped, and then they kind of went back, and now they're flipped
Yeah.
again.
Kind of like the tides. The
It
tides
is,
change.
it is a
Okay.
really interesting dynamic in the government.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he came to Oklahoma Territory after the war with some other soldiers and settled at Harrison. And I am not sure where Harrison, Oklahoma is, but it had to have been on the west side of the state. If it was in Oklahoma Territory. Got involved in the movement to organize the territory.
Served in the convention.
Yeah, and then moved to El Reno. And when the territorial government was established by the Organic Act of May 1890, he served as the territorial secretary. And evidently, he did such a phenomenal job
Yes.
at that.
Right.
I think he became very well known in Washington, DC. He paid a lot of attention to finances and accurate, timely reports for the Department of Interior and Treasury. So I think he was like, Governor Steele was like doing the work here in the state or the territory.
Right.
And he was
More
representing
the territory.
in Washington, DC is what it really sounds like.
Yeah. So whenever the seat was vacated,
Yeah,
then he.
he was
Harrison
appointed.
is just a little bit southeast of Sallisaw,
Okay, kind of
So not
centrally
too far.
located.
so not too far from
Ellie.
Fort Smith.
Oh, wow, way over on the east side of the state. So he actually settled in
he-
probably, that would have been Choctaw territory, maybe
Interesting.
Cherokee. Yeah, wow.
Cherokee.
Cherokee, okay,
Interesting.
Cherokee
Okay.
land.
Hmm.
The
All right,
Cherokee.
there you
Wow,
go.
That's interesting. Okay, so he became acting governor in November, and in February, he left the office. being the governor of Oklahoma just didn't really set right with
Mhm.
him. He just wasn't feeling it. Of course, he was appointed.
Well,
He was not elected, so he didn't really run for the office.
well, and then in 1894, he ran for the post of mayor.
Oh, in Guthrie.
Right.
Yeah,
And so he held that till 1896.
yeah. So, I mean, he stayed,
But yeah, he didn't take this.
but I mean, he did a great thing. He
Yeah.
paid off a large portion of Guthrie's debt and put the
Mhm.
community on really
Right.
sound financial ground. So,
And heart failure got him in 1897.
yep, yep. So, I mean, his time as a governor was so short, you know, but
And he
anyway.
doesn't look like he's very young.
Yeah, this
off
is true.
and-
This is true. He was born in 1833, so he was 6 years older than Governor Steele.
Right.
It was, yeah, so, yeah. All right, and so then Abraham C.
Yeah, that's a baby.
became, yes, this is the man, he was a pink
Pinky
earring.
ring.
And he was born in a courthouse in
She-
Virginia.
When we were
This-
researching this earlier, she asked, I asked, well, doctors, lawyers,
I-
I guess maybe mama went to the courthouse.
I don't know, yeah. Someone said maybe his mom was serving on jury duty,
Right.
but probably not in
Uh,
1832.
No,
Yeah.
probably not.
That's not gonna happen, especially in Virginia, the
So-
South, that's not happening. So anyway, the family moved to Missouri though in 1836, so he grew up in Missouri, which
Mhm.
makes, really a neighbor of
Right.
Oklahoma.
And he was the eldest.
But he worked on the railroad.
The pick and shovel.
Working on the
Missouri
railroad.
Pacific.
Yeah, and yeah, like with a pick and a shovel, Lane Railroad.
Taught school. And then guess what he did?
He read law.
He read law. He did.
Yeah, so anyway, he also served in the Civil War.
Mhm.
And with the
32nd.
Missouri infantry. And a lot of these guys fought in some of the same battles. Vicksburg, Chattanooga, Atlanta, Savannah. I mean, they were in some of the
Same one.
serious ones. Anyway, he rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel and was in command of a regiment. And at the end, he entered Republican politics.
Served on Crawford County Attorney and then the circuit judge of the 9th Missouri District.
Right, and then, so to reward him for his loyalty to the Republican Party, President Harrison appointed him to be Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of Oklahoma Territory. And,
Circuit judge.
yeah, circuit, and so he would have been the first judge to serve, because in 1890, that was the year Governor Steele
Getting all of us.
established
Yeah,
those branches of
branches.
government. So he would have been
Uh-huh.
probably the very first territorial judge. And he traveled, held court through his whole district, and included all of the unorganized territory between the 98th and 100th meridian from Kansas to Greer County, Texas,
I'd
which
say
later became Greer County, Oklahoma, but all the
But,
way
yeah.
down to that.
Still a pretty wide area.
Yes, yeah. So he took the oath of office in 1892 and promoted the development of the territory, particularly opening the lands for settlement. So he's part of the group.
Right.
We need to have another land grant.
Right. We need to get this area settled and
Mhm. And
finish.
so Cheyenne and Arapahoe District were the lands that he got
those 6 counties.
open, yeah, became 6 counties. He was noted for establishing the education system,
Right.
which right on Governor C. I mean, we really need that. He advocated a compulsory school attendance. That means you gotta go to school. And favored a
Abortion.
tax on liquor sales to raise money. So this is prior to prohibition.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking,
Money was in the alcohol.
exactly,
Raising-
I
yeah.
feel like this guy had a good business
Yeah,
sense
he did.
about that sort of
Pinky
thing.
ring.
That so,
Those taxes went to the schools.
right, so opponents criticized him for his philosophy of promoting the welfare of African Americans. Now, you have to remember, this is,
1800.
yeah,
92.
it's a while after the Civil War,
Mhm.
but still, a very divided country.
Different country, different time.
Right, yeah, and African Americans were not, they did not have equal rights.
Mhm.
And so he thought that this was, he favored separate but equal education for Black children and a local option approval of school construction. So, I mean, he
He still wanted to separate,
understood, yeah,
but
he
they needed
understood,
equal.
yeah, why, I get not understood. He accepted the fact that people wanted to keep the races separate.
Mhm.
But he wanted to be sure that every child had a quality
Right,
education.
had the same
And
opportunity to get the same.
right, and in
education.
those days, you know, there were Black communities
Mhm.
being established here in Oklahoma.
We've-
And yeah, so I feel like maybe the building those schools probably helped make those communities stronger
Or vice
and better
versa, the communities were built so that the school
around
could
the
be-
school.
right,
Yeah, exactly. He promoted Oklahoma Territory to future investors and settlers, which I thought was also, I mean,
Foresight.
yes, he saw the fact that at some point the land was all going to become a state.
Mhm.
And so he convinced the legislature to approve a whopping $15,000 appropriation to create an Oklahoma exhibit for the 1893 World Fair. Well,
The world.
yeah, in Chicago, which I think is kind of fascinating.
She said Oklahoma had never been better advertised.
Yeah, than the fair's exhibit. And so I think that that's kind of interesting. But he was wanting to,
He was promoting.
yeah, let's get people to move here.
Yeah.
He was an able and dynamic governor. He served,
Almost,
I mean,
little
just
over
a
a
little
year.
over a year.
we're talking.
And look at all the things he
Yeah.
accomplished. I mean, this guy was a go-getter.
Yeah, he was.
He had a lot of physical ailments following an accident in 1903, and went to California, but he had been very involved in Kingfisher, investing in local businesses and the community as a
Right.
whole. And so that's where he's buried. They brought him back from California.
Yeah.
And the mansion, the C Mansion, in Kingfisher is open to the public.
Mhm.
So that's kind of a cool tribute to
Right.
him.
Right.
Yeah, so anyway, the bachelor governor of Oklahoma Territory,
He was
there you
never
go.
married.
Yeah, so he leaves office and William, we have a nice profile.
It kind of looks like he's looking at him, the previous
That's-
picture. He's
yeah.
like, it was all taken together.
Yeah, Governor Renfro comes in. He's the fourth governor from North Carolina.
Mhm.
So this guy's gonna be a little bit different from
Yeah,
the
not-
first.
Not quite
Three.
the same views.
Yeah, they were all more northern states. They fought for the Union in the Civil War. But he fought for the North Carolina, well, was a member of the North Carolina Infantry. And so that would mean he fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War. He moved to Arkansas and then came into Oklahoma Territory, and this guy was businessman extraordinaire.
Yeah.
Which I think he looks like a businessman, just to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
well, after the war, when he settled there in Arkansas, he entered into the mercantile business there before he even came.
Yeah, so
here.
then he's like, oh, wait, there's some stuff happening over there. I'm going to Norman,
Right.
where, what was in Norman? A university was already
Yeah,
in
already
Norman.
established.
And so he came in 1889.
Oh, so no, he didn't then.
Yeah,
yeah.
it wasn't established till
Right.
1890.
Right.
So he moved to Norman. He opened a livery stable, which that's where they would care for horses. Okay. And
Very successful.
became so successful that he invests in a bank.
Yeah.
Probably one of the
And then
first.
became a
banks
majority owner
Norman.
in that Norman State Bank.
Yeah, and then invested in real estate in Norman. I mean, this guy he was all about it.
Yeah.
But he was also a Democrat, a Southern Democrat.
Yep.
Admired Grover Cleveland.
Mhm.
Grover Cleveland became president after Benjamin Harrison, which was Cleveland's second time to serve as president. It goes Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland.
Right.
So he comes in after Benjamin Harrison, and he after serving as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention that nominated Grover Cleveland, Renfro was named by Cleveland to the Oklahoma Territorial governorship.
Because he wanted an Oklahoma resident and businessman to run the Territorial.
Right, yeah, not because he had done all this work to get Cleveland elected, but because he was from Oklahoma and he was a businessman. And so President Cleveland saw benefit to that.
Right,
And so he was the only Democrat to serve
Mhm.
as a territorial governor.
and his term was also longer than any of the predecessors.
Yeah, I mean, he was there for 4 years.
Due, they think, to his extensive business training and experience,
Mhm.
and his refusal to fight openly with his political opponents and critics.
Okay, I think maybe we need to get some
Pointers?
words, of wisdom from Governor Renfro, Territorial Governor
Let's not
Renfro.
air your dirty laundry.
Exactly. Let's be nice to each other, and let's just talk about the business at hand.
Right.
I love that. So he devoted his energy to campaigning for Oklahoma statehood and expanding the settlement of Oklahoma Territory, which means what? Another land run.
That's right.
The Cherokee Outlet in 1893 was the major event that occurred during his administration, and then also the Kickapoo lands
Mhm.
in 1895. He also promoted more educational progress, leased school lands to raise money for public education, and took other measures as well. So this school land situation, so every county, I believe, was given X number of acres for school land.
Right.
And so this was to encourage communities to build a school. That meant that they didn't have to buy any land. The land was
Right,
set aside.
Right, that way they couldn't have that excuse of, well, we don't have any land, or we only have a little acre. Everyone was given the same
Amount.
starting
Yeah.
quality.
Yeah, and it wasn't a location, it was an amount of land, and so you could go into a community and get that amount of land.
Mhm.
Well, some places chose not to use the school lands, and so other counties could take that amount of acreage
Mhm.
and people could lease it and move it to other counties. And in the panhandle of Oklahoma, a lot of those really big ranches out there
Mhm.
were school land leases.
Really?
Yes, where they kind of took that acreage amount
Mhm.
and claimed land out in the panhandle
Mhm.
and then leased it. So the government was the beneficiary probably of that lease
Mhm.
money.
Mhm.
But yeah, we're gonna do a trail talk about those
Interesting.
land lease, the
Yeah.
school land leases,
Thinking
but
of tiptoe around that one.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. And then he opened Northwestern Oklahoma State University. He
Southern Democrat.
Yeah, Southern Democrats, he fought for the South, and so he probably never changed the way he felt about African American
Mhm.
people. But he worked for passage of laws to increase, first of all, the way this is written,
Yeah.
makes it sound a little nicer than what it actually
Probably
was. So what really happened? He allowed a pocket veto of any bills that would improve the lot of life for African Americans in Oklahoma. That just means any ideas that Congress brought forth, he just held his little pocket veto, and he could just veto.
Yeah. No matter what.
No matter what. Yep. But
He did, however.
he worked for the passage of laws to increase the number of schools for Black citizens and did not oppose the creation of the Colored Agricultural and Normal University of Oklahoma Territory, which became Langston.
Langston
Okay,
in 1896.
he did not oppose it.
He did not.
In other words, he was like, yeah, okay. That means he did not promote it. He did not think that the idea of a university for an equal but separate college education for African American people was important enough to promote, he chose not to stand in the way of it.
Right.
Which was a very passive
Right.
thing to do, but regardless,
He got-
Langston
he got a vote,
University,
right.
yeah, came forth. So anyway, then William McKinley is elected president. He's a Republican, so
His tenure.
yeah,
ended.
Renfro knows he's out
Yeah.
because again, these
They're being
they're
appointed.
being appointed by
Right.
the president
Right.
of the day. And he
Public life
yeah, and
went into,
lead and zinc production.
because that's the natural progression, right?
I know. He was probably just a really great businessman and just saw opportunities, probably an entrepreneur
Mhm,
at
mhm,
heart.
mhm.
Anyway, so he left office and Cassius Barnes is appointed, yeah. And you can see the styles, the trends. of
Bow
the
tie's
day.
gotten,
It's flat, kind
It
of
is-
squared
it
off looking, but he's got that stiff, probably a
Yes.
celluloid collar. Isn't
Right.
that what they call that?
they just can take it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the hair's kind of got the side swoop.
Yeah,
That's
it's got
where
a little
the baby face had more of a middle
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
I'd like to know if he had a pinky ring though.
Governor Renfro didn't have any.
He didn't have an option.
Yeah.
He's gonna go with what he feels comfortable with, which
Yeah.
is stick with what he knows.
So, he was born in New York, which I think, how did he, yeah, how did he end up here? Moved to Michigan and grew up on a farm.
Okay, so we have farmland.
and-
coming in.
Then he learned how to run a telegraph.
Mhm.
So when the war started, he joined
Worked for
and
Western Union.
worked for Western Union, delivering messages. Can you imagine how important his job was?
He was actually employed in Kansas when the Civil War erupted. So yeah, and then joined the army.
Uh-huh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, and then was stationed there in Arkansas.
yeah. I
Can
think.
you imagine knowing maybe what you have in your hand would be the end of the war or a piece-
Yes, just
a vital
how,
piece?
yes, how important those messages
Like the
were.
British are coming, the British are coming.
Right, exactly. I mean, and probably some messages that were in code.
I was gonna say, they probably didn't say what they actually were meant
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah, but it was important for him to take that information. Did it, you know, the dots and the
This is info.
dashes and
Right, exactly.
interpret it. So, anyway,
Crazy.
yeah, after the war, he was mustered out. I think that means that he probably
job
just, yeah, the job ended.
Yeah.
And he went into business in Little Rock and got married and became active in Republican politics, served as a U.S. Marshal.
Terms.
Yeah. And then he came to as the receiver for the U.S. Land Office in Guthrie for the very first land run in 1889.
How
So
cool
that
is
was
that?
that was a big deal.
was.
And he stayed there until
1893.
1893 when Grover Cleveland was elected because he was a Democrat.
Okay.
He's a Republican.
That's right.
And in 1894, he successfully ran for the Oklahoma Territorial House of Representatives. So I guess
She served
they
two terms of
elected,
that
the House
with
of
representatives.
Representatives. I don't know if there was a
President
Senate
was
as well. Yeah, and then the governor was appointed by the president. And he served 2 terms. He was selected the speaker. And then worked with the Republican National Committee. So of course, when William McKinley is
Here's my
elected,
award.
yeah, he's appointed as the territorial governor.
In 1896.
So there was a lot of fighting going on in these days. So this is, you know, everybody's gotten all settled in.
Republicans, Democrats.
Yeah, and the land has been distributed.
Uh-huh.
And now it's time people are wanting to join the union. They're
A state.
wanting Oklahoma to become a state. But no one can, well, people cannot agree. Do we have 2 separate states? I mean, you might have heard us, we've mentioned the state of Sequoia before, which was like an Indian territory state, and then Oklahoma resulting just from Oklahoma territory. Do the 2 merge and become one state?
Mhm.
And I mean, we know
what happened.
What happened. Spoiler alert.
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, that was what happened during his term. It was kind of destined
Yeah.
to not be a great thing. So
Uh,
any of the programs that he wanted to pass through were tossed around by the different factions,
Right, yeah,
depending on where they
where
stood.
they sit on that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard for him to get anything done. But he did, and I want you to know that we're going to use the language of the day when we describe
Yes.
the
This
institutions.
is not our picking of words.
Right, the institutions that he helped get into place, but it was more social service,
Mhm.
which, I mean, you have to have those things. And the territory is a few years old now.
Right. I mean, all
So-
these things have to be established. They don't just come with, like a starter kit.
Yeah, so he wanted to have 5 major social service institutions: a home for the deaf and mute, a mental hospital, a penitentiary, and 2 industrial schools.
Right.
And so, I mean, those are all things that you really need whenever you're forming this, well, eventually a state.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was just territorial, those would
Yeah.
still would have needed to become that
Right.
eventually.
Don't you see the benefit of having different people fill these leadership positions?
Different
Because
ways of
everyone
thinking.
kind of has a passion. And so they come into office and they're able to push through these things that
Yeah,
are
I
really
mean,
important.
this was 7 years after the fact of, our first
True.
territorial governor. And this is the first time any of this has been mentioned.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
So,
Yeah. And so, he, rather than building state-owned facilities that would have to be maintained with tax money, he resolved social service issues by contracting with private companies to provide school textbooks, care for the deaf and the insane, and house convicted criminals. But I mean, those were his ideas.
Right.
I don't know that there
They
was
actually
really,
went to-
that much success with it, because we know that penitentiaries were we have
State
state
funded.
run, we have privately owned penitentiaries now, but that's been in the past.
Right,
what-
this wasn't something that has been
Yeah.
around since statehood.
Yeah, so anyway, but because he couldn't settle all the fighting down, President McKinley was like, yeah, good job, buddy, but we're gonna need to replace you.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, and honestly, after 4 years of not being able to be
He was
that
probably
leader,
exhausted and
yeah, I'm sure he didn't bother to argue about it. But he went on to live in Guthrie, served 2 terms as the mayor.
just politics and law
Yeah.
still.
Yeah, and his contributions for growth and progress were mainly in the field of social services. And so he just really saw a need for education and for kind of a welfare system to
Right.
help people who
Right.
needed that help. Mhm. So anyway, there you have it, guys.
The first Fab Five.
The first Fab 5, the territorial governors who had all the
Got us rolling.
responsibility. Man, they had a lot of work to
I'm
do.
glad it was, I would
Yeah.
want it.
So anyway, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you've learned some new things about the state of Oklahoma.
If nothing else, what red law means. I mean,
Yeah,
come on now.
exactly. If someone reads law, they are gonna become a lawyer. Well, back in the day.
Not now.
Yeah, not anymore. You
Lot
can't get away
more
with it
hoops
now.
and red tape.
So tomorrow, Pam Dobbins from Christian Helping Hands over in Comanche is going to be our special guest, and we're super excited to talk about her and just kind of let everybody know all the cool things that she has going over there. And anyway, so be sure and join us then.
3 o'clock.
And until then, happy
Happy
trails.